Hello and welcome to a brand new segment for the 2022 edition of the Exide Masterclass. A little something I like to call legends. Okay, let's put the current import ban aside just for a moment, because I have a theory. I feel that Sri Lanka as a nation has always and consistently punched above its weight when it comes to interesting automobiles. So I'm going to take you through some of the most fascinating, storied, collectible and rare cars in our island. Not just cars that are internationally fawned upon by aficionados overseas. No, I want to hone in on some of those rarer gems that fly under the radar. Every car that we feature is going to be interesting, but it also has to have some sort of cultural impact on our island nation. Now, if you wanted me to name a French classic car that combined stylishness, comfort, practicality, and desirability, for me, there is one clear winner. The Citroën DS. Now, of course, this isn't a Citroën DS, as you probably would have noticed. This is a Peugeot 404, the other French sedan you could have bought in the 1960s. And to be very honest, at first glance, it doesn't look all that special. At least not compared to a Citroën DS, or the Goddess as it was known. The Peugeot 404 replaced the 403, and there was instantly a rather obvious problem. It looked exactly like the Austin Cambridge, Morris Oxford, and Fiat 1800 and 2300 sedans. There's a simple explanation for this. All of the above were designed by Italian design house Pininfarina. But there were differences in the details. The rear fins were just a bit more elegant for the 404 than they were on the BMCs, and unlike either the Fiat or the Morris, there were no quarter-glass windows up front. Although the 404 may have looked similar to the competition, it was significantly different underneath. Peugeot designed their own suspension for this car. Not only was it designed to be rebuildable, but it was able to last more than 100,000 kilometers, something that was unheard of back then. Later cars got servo-assisted brakes with discs up front. Plus the engine was a Hemi, which meant you got ample amounts of torque even though the engine was just 1.6 liters in size. The 404 was built for durability. It had a worm drive differential, more commonly found on torque-heavy applications such as trucks, and virtually impossible to break. The drive shaft was a torque tube which was shielded from bad roads and helped locate the rear under acceleration. It also meant that the car could have excellent axle articulation. It may not have been quite as comfortable as the Citroën DS, but it was 80% there, with those long travel shocks infinitely more reliable than the complex hydropneumatic system used in the Citroëns. This unassuming saloon car won the grueling East African Safari Rally in 1963, 1966, 1967 and 1968. And in the years the 404 didn't win outright, it was busy scooping up class wins and second places.
It was indeed a great victory for Bob Shankland and Chris Rothwell. Driving a Peugeot 404, they did extremely well.
This was followed by the 504. It introduced independent rear suspension, disc brakes all around, and a floor-mounted shifter. And some models, like this car in particular, came with fuel injection as well. The 504 won the 1986 European Car of the Year award, and yet it still managed to cost half as much as similar from the likes of BMW. This was probably peak Peugeot, and the model that Sri Lankans relate to most. And of course, they kept on winning those grueling rallies. Now, these rally wins are probably what led to the local names of full safari and half safari for the various versions of the 404. But just think about it for a second. Here was a humble family sedan, not too dissimilar to what you'd just be able to go out and buy at a showroom, beating the likes of Porsches and Lancias in their own backyard. And this really set a pattern for Peugeot in Sri Lanka, because if you think about it, they were really used for all manner of things. The 404, the 504 and the 505 were all cars adored by the tourism industries for their brilliant comfort, especially on our bad roads. These were cars that were also used by doctors, dignitaries, and police officers. There were pickup versions used by the government. Wagons were converted to hearses by funeral houses. And there were even ambulance variants as well. Okay, so the 404 and its direct successors are legends in their own right. These were cars that were intrinsically weaved into the fabric of Sri Lankan car culture. Unfortunately, through the 90s and early 2000s, Peugeot sort of lost their mojo. Their cars became front-wheel drive, they sacrificed comfort for cost efficiency, and they started becoming less memorable. So, I guess that's where our Peugeot story ends, right? Except no, there's one car I left out, the 205 GTI. This car in my mind is the absolute definition of the 80s, and it's the complete opposite to what I was driving just a few moments ago. I mean, seriously, how did Peugeot manage to go from building solid, dependable, luxurious, comfortable cars to something small, brittle, but nimble and so much fun to drive? Pretty much overnight as well. Now, there's a common debate between 205 GTI owners as to which is better, the 1.6 litre or the 1.9. The common consensus is the 1.6 litre is a more purer experience, but you really do need to rev it out. Whereas this, the heavier chested 1.9, well, it's so torquey. It's a bit lazy actually in terms of engine power delivery, but when you get it up there, the power just comes on tap as you'd expect. And I'm also acutely aware of how lethal these things are. In the 80s and 90s, they were actually known for their many fatal accidents because just people couldn't control all that power going through the front wheels. And yeah, this is a front-wheel drive car, and usually when it comes to Peugeots, that would be considered a bad thing, especially when you used to consider that the 504, the 505, the 404 were all rear-wheel drive vehicles. But for such a small, nimble chassis like this, it's just joy-inducing. I love this little motor. It's brilliant. Peugeot went rallying with the 205 too. The 205 T16 had four-wheel drive and a mid-engined layout. Although it may not have shared all that much with the road-going car, the 205 rally car dominated just like the 404 and 504 had, winning 2 world championships against the likes of Ford, Lancia and Audi. The 205 GTI was born in the wake of what many considered was the first hot hatch, the Volkswagen GTI Mark I. The GTI Mark I single-handedly created a new genre for sports cars. But by the time the Peugeot arrived, the Volkswagen was already in its second generation. The Mark II Golf was significantly heavier. It was still a great car, but the Peugeot, which weighed under 900 kilos, was in the right place at the right time. All of a sudden, there was a new hot hatch legend. Although many people thought Pininfarina had a hand in the design of the 205, it was actually all done in-house. Only the cabrio was given out to Pininfarina. But just look at it. It looks as if it came at least from the 2000s, maybe the late 90s. But no, this car first appeared in 1983. You know, it's funny. When I was doing research for this video, it truly astounded me how many people came up to me and said that their friends or family used to own one of the cars behind me. And while some of the newer products of Peugeot might have a smaller following behind them, I have to wonder, having driven this Peugeot 3008 SUV and many of the other new products of Peugeot, whether the French engineers are actually looking back at their history and incorporating some of the lessons learnt from their previous models when they're planning the future. That's all from me today on the Exide Masterclass. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Catch you again on the next episode.